Well, good afternoon and welcome to the regular Board of Trustees meeting of the Hayward Area Shoreline Planning Agency on April 13th, 2023. It's 3:03 right now, and we'll start our meeting by Devin. I'll ask you to call the roll, please.
Yes, Director Chair Watson. Paul Hodges.
Present.
Francisco Domingo.
I'm here.
Welcome. Chair Watson.
Here.
And we'd like to welcome new trustees from the city of Hayward. Very good to have you here. Welcome. Thanks and congratulations to Lizzie Marquez.
Absolutely. Yes.
Promotion to the Alameda County Supervisors. I'd also like to take a role of prospective trustees. And that would be Duncan.
Present.
And Arkenshi.
Here.
Okay, I'd also like to announce the staff who are present. And that would be Amanda Sanders with the State Regional Park District, and Willis. We're joined on the phone, I see, by District Council at the Park District, Jason Rosenberg. We're also joined today by Brian Lesko at FAR, by Taylor Richard, City of Hayward, by Erica Castillo, Alameda County School of Layton. And we're also, I see, joined by other staff at the agencies, including Jimmy Dang, excuse me, Jimmy, I missed you, Jimmy Dang at Orloma. And Chris Barton from the East Bay Regional Park District, Jackie Zipkin at the East Bay Discharges Authority. And there are some attorneys as well. Michael Viglia from City of Hayward, Amanda Barnhill, and Sarah Boiser, I believe. Have I missed anyone from staff? Welcome.
Great, thank you, Devin. And I would also like to have a hearty welcome to Francisco. I'm glad you're on this committee and we'll talk about Melissa probably at the end of the meeting. But anyway, our meeting today is held pursuant to the Brown Act. Board members and staff are participating in person. The public can still participate, and we welcome your participation via phone, video conferencing, and we will now move to public comments. And Devin, could you tell the public how they would be able to speak to the public during public session here?
Yes. Thank you, Chair Roscoe. So public comments may be submitted in one of two ways, either by sending an email to asanders@ebparks.org by 12 o'clock today, or live via Zoom. So anyone who's on the call today through Zoom is welcome to make a public comment. You can use the raise hand feature, and Amanda, who's running our meeting, will be able to call on you, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Excellent. Do we have any public comments?
I don't believe so, but Amanda, do we have any public comments?
No, we do not have any public comments. If there's anybody in the actual meeting room that would like to speak, but Director Wasp, no?
I see no takers in the audience, but thank you for being here. So if we have no public comments, we'll move to we received no emails, any type of correspondence, I assume?
Correct.
Okay, then we'll move right to the approval of the minutes of January 12th, 2023 meeting. The minutes are before you. I think they've been in your packet. If anybody has any questions, comments, or changes, let me know. If not, I'll seek a motion to approve.
I'll move.
I have a motion to approve by Director Hodges.
Second.
And a second by Member Zermano. Any further comments, discussion? Devin, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Trustee Zermano.
See.
Trustee Hodges.
Yes.
And Chair Roscoe.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Minutes are approved.
Great, thank you. And we'll move to item number 2, which is the City of Hayward project updates. Welcome.
Hello, trustees. I have nothing to report. There's no new projects on that shoreline.
Our great main event today is the HASPA JPA agreement. So this is an informational item, and Nicole Witt, Council with Hanson Bridget, will talk to us. And Kevin, will you introduce? Nicole?
Yes, I'd like to introduce Nicole Witt, Council with Hanson Bridges, who has been preparing with Allison Shute and our district council, Jason Rosenberg, and myself, the draft JPA that's in your packet today. She'll explain in a presentation all the details of the document. Today, I'll just remind you that this is a session to provide feedback to the attorney. And luckily, we have a number of the attorneys on the phone with us today, on Zoom today. But she'll explain the feedback that we've received so far and the edits that we've been able to incorporate to the packet that you've got there. So without further delay, Nicole.
Good afternoon, trustees. Thank you, and future prospective trustees. Nice to be here with you all. I'm just going to start.
Excuse me, Nicole, could I have you put on your camera, please? Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem at all. And I will share my screen. All right. Amanda, can you see the slide presentation?
Yes, it looks good.
Wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome.
So as Devin mentioned, we have been working with the team from the Regional Park District to take the term sheet that the trustees adopted last fall and to incorporate those changes and build out those changes in an updated draft JPA for the Hayward Area Shoreline Planning Agency. The updates that I'm going to walk you through today, I'm going to highlight for you all the points where we've kind of built out and developed some ideas in some ways and have moved away from the term sheet so that you're aware of kind of any proposed changes as well as input from the legal team and TAC that we've already incorporated as we've gone. What you have in your packet is a clean version. We also have a red line if that would be helpful, but there have been sort of a number of substantial changes. So we thought at least preliminarily a clean version might be easier to review. So as you know, so the original term sheet was adopted in the fall. And as we understood the goals for this update really was to update the JPA to meet future evolving needs for the next 20 plus years and to kind of present as much and provide as much maximum flexibility for the agency to change and adjust. So if there are differences in operational or management needs from the functioning of the agency right now, that's built into your governing document. You have that flexibility baked in. You don't need to go back and update the JPA to adjust to those modernizations and updates. And we've also just generally reviewed the JPA and updated it to conform to the JPA law and sort of streamlined and updated where we thought it might be helpful. So this here is our review schedule. You'll see we are about halfway through the tasks that we have in terms of reaching out for input. And today we're here with our presentation to the board. We anticipate that this item will return to the board for consideration in early May, and then member agency approval May to June in order to meet the deadline and extend the JPA or the term of the JPA. All right, so I'm just going to jump right in and start working through the sections, and feel free, I think, to stop me if you have any questions as we go. So the authority and purpose sections, consistent with the term sheet, we really just updated this to align with the sort of changed focus on or expanded focus on climate adaptation. We moved the original purpose of the JPA up to the recitals because that purpose we understand has been fulfilled. And then we also built out the recitals so that each member agency could provide some context for the connection between their agency's powers and the purpose of HASPA, drawing some of those connections so that it's clearer what the common powers are and the common authorities are that are being exercised here. The section that was continuation of the JPA, we've changed the name a bit to creation of the JPA. And this section, there weren't really any substantive changes. It was a reorganization. We removed some duplication, but there weren't any substantive changes to this section, just tried to kind of clean up and streamline a bit. The powers section. So the power section, we included a few updates to effectively provide a broader grant of authority and power, and then some narrower specific powers. So this is the broad authority of the agency, and in particular, these powers. The term sheet had provided that all the powers should stay the same, but we received input from the legal team that there was a recommendation to streamline some of the powers. There were a few that are listed in the current JPA that are really, I think, more operational in nature than true powers or authorities of the agency. And so our recommendation, with I believe legal team support from the different member agencies, would be to move those pieces out to a staff document and to simplify and streamline the powers consistent with other JPA agreements of this type. Organization. So this section had a fair amount of updating. We streamlined the language, really consistent with with sort of moving details out of the JPA agreement that could function in other governance documents. So we moved a lot of details related to, you know, the governance of meetings and things like that can be reserved for like a bylaws document rather than the contractual document between the parties here. In addition, the current JPA incorporates the TAC and the establishment of the TAC in the JPA. For administrative efficiency, we're recommending moving that out of the agreement and into a staff level document. And that document would have the rules for the TAC, the, you know, any sort of funding mechanism or requirements there, all sort of in these staff level documents that support the more streamlined JPA. One of the items that we wanted to raise for you all here is the idea of terms, set terms for the trustees. So currently under the JPA, the trustees serve at the will of their member agencies. And it was suggested that it may be advantageous, or there's some benefits to setting set terms for the trustees, because it gives the trustees some independence from their member agencies. That independence already exists under the law, but it gives a little bit more formal independence, because if a trustee is voting in a manner that is disfavored by their member agency, they have the authority to stay with HASPA and to vote their conscience effectively. The flip side of that is obviously that if you have someone who is voting in a way that is wildly inconsistent with their member agency, then there is no mechanism for removing that individual from the HASPA board on that basis. So there wasn't consensus among the legal group about whether or not to change from the current language that trustees are serve at the term or at the will of their member agencies. We wanted to flag this issue for you all and for your any consideration or discussion. Do we want to pause there before I move into sort of the next meaty section of voting? Are there any questions just on what I've moved through so far?
Yeah, go right ahead. I think that's a very good idea.
It's a lot.
So let's, in each section, let's we have some questions. Let's go there. So go ahead.
And it was about, again, you just said that it was some discussion regarding the HASPA board being able to put terms on the member agencies members.
It's effectively that rather than having trustees serve at the will of their member agencies, such that a member agency could at any time say you're no longer on the board, the HASPA board, we're removing you, we're replacing you with someone else. Rather than that structure, it would be a structure where once you are appointed to the HASPA board, you are appointed for a set 4-year term. What that offers is some independence from the member agency, because you then would have the ability to, as I said, kind of vote your conscience if there is a disagreement between the member agency and the particular trustee, that you could still vote in a way that the trustee thought was best, without any tool for them to, for the member agency to really rescind that appointment. But that is different.
Understood that,
Okay.
but to me, the problem is that a lot of the individual school service trustees are elected.
Mhm.
And that if that set term is, 4 years or whatever, and they're in the middle of 2 years.
Mhm.
To me, that's a problem. Because the way our board operates is that the president at the time makes a decision on who serves on whatever committees. And this is considered like a committee. And to me, if a trustee is not voting to the interests of our particular agencies, to me, that's responsibility of the agency, not HASPA. So that's where I sit.
Francisco?
Similar to that, so has there been a decision on the number of years for this term limit, 4 years, 3 years? Nothing yet.
No, as I said, there was.
It's up to us to decide. All right, okay. So let's suppose that it's a 4-year term and the elected official is voted out of office. Does that official then come out of the HASPA board? Is that going to be in the language?
So what, and I think we would obviously need to make sure that the language is drafted and updated. So we would need to make it consistent. But what I've seen for other clients that have term limits that are with the board members or appointees is that they can stay on even after maybe they term out with their member agency or something like that. They are able to conclude their term. As I said, that's not how the language is drafted now, but that's something we need to resolve.
I'm on stopwaste.org, and if you're voted out of office, then you have to leave stopwaste.org. So it sounds like maybe we need to include something along those lines too. All right. So why 20 years? So after 20 years, we start swimming, or we just the end of the world? Why not? It really just blew my mind for the next 20 years plus. Why are we just going for 20 years if the climate change is for the next 100 years? So how did we come up with 20? Why not 40?
20 plus is, I think, the way to think about it. The way I would frame it is that this isn't intended to be a short-term update, but an update that serves the agency for some decades to come. Whether that's 2 decades or 3 decades or 4 decades is a bit of an open question, because there's so much that is unknown in terms of your evolving needs. But what we tried to do was to, building off of the term sheet, create as many sort of alternative options for different scenarios that may arise that that the trustees have envisioned and that we would envision as well, and built that in. It's not to say that HASPA won't need an update to its JPA in the next 30 years, 20 plus years, whatever it is, but to build in some of that flexibility. But there wasn't a
All right.
particular.
We're not seeing the end of HASPA in 22 years.
That's not.
All right. Maybe that's what I read. So, all right, let's see. How do we come up with 25%? The board has the authority to approve up to 25% for annual fees. 25, 20, 15, 25 is just a nice number.
I think
It's not divisible by 3.
Sure. So, is there any, I can move to the voting section that gets to.
Let's separate these,
There was
because we
anything else?
just hit this one section here, so
Right.
let's go section by section.
Okay,
Really
I'm
get
going by what was sent to me. All right, my apologies. Okay,
Any comments on what we supposed mentioned the first sections that we're dealing mostly with the board? If not, I kind of like the idea of suggesting that you would have this independent body. I can't believe for a minute that we could ever want to have a situation, I don't know, maybe no, do, but to have you be elected, lose your office or retire from office and then still stay a member of HASPA. I don't, represent a district or a city, so I don't know how that would work. I'm also interested, just the details of it, maybe we might try it. I just would find that I'm trying to think of a scenario where someone would, I mean, I hope everyone votes their conscience, but I hope they consult with their agency, obviously. And if you're a renegade that suggests, or, you have a lot of ability on this board, you got a lot of veto power in this board. I mean, you can be a stick in the mud and say, it only takes a couple votes to, as it's concerned, with three of us, it's really easy to stymie anything. And to suggest that, that's where I would think it would be. It would be someone who would be voting against what we want to do at HASPA or against the wishes of the agency. I would think the agency, wouldn't they have the ability to direct? Well, I mean, I know there's the debate. I'm just wondering, why wouldn't an agency just censure the member and then strip them of their committee assignment? Because that is the realm of the president, as I see it at the East Bay Regional Park District anyway. And it's happened before a number of times.
And that was my,
It's happened before in other agencies. I don't think it's a problem. I love the idea of vote your conscience. It makes sense. But I just don't know how that'll work. I think we need to hash that out just a little bit more.
I would say the ability of
A member of an appointed body like HASPA to vote their conscience exists outside of term limits. So, or not term limits, rather set terms. So that, as you said, you would hope that the trustees feel confident voting their conscience. That exists anyways. And so that isn't something that we need to make this change to the JPA in order to in any way establish, or it's it sounds from what I'm hearing, and I welcome further input, that there isn't, at least so far, an interest in moving away from the current at-will structure.
If you get term limits, that doesn't mean a person's only going to be there for that term. A new person's going to come in. It can be the same person, term after term.
Right.
They just have to be reappointed by their district or their agency, correct?
Right. I misspoke when I said term, set terms.
Yes, set terms.
So that is a way of purging it. You do have a renegade in there. So you can't get rid of that. So gives the agency a way to get them on, move them on.
Go ahead.
I could take clarity on when you said vote your conscience. I'm thinking that, the reason I'm putting on this is to vote for the will or the good of HASPA as well as my agency. I mean, my conscience may be somewhere else, but, I voted in to protect the district. And in doing so, it's protecting the sea rise. So regardless of my own personal, conscience, I just have a little issue with that word because, where I may believe something different, but in the role that I'm serving, it's to protect our Loma and to support HASPA.
I think those two are consistent. I think the idea that this is really getting at is that when you are sitting on HASPA's board, because this is its own separate public agency, that you're wearing your HASPA hat here. And that it's not simply sort of a conduit or a pass-through for your member agency, but that you can sort of evaluate these issues and serve. You have a duty to the agency, to HASPA here, and so that's what this is starting to draw the distinction.
All right. So good.
Yeah, I wanted to get clarification. I thought I read on here when you said something about longevity or term. That's each one of us trustees are up here at the pleasure of our agency. And so it's up to the agency to determine what a term would be, not this body. And then also as far as somebody being voted out of office or leaving for whatever reason, it's up to the agency to fill that seat immediately, I would think. And I don't know if we go into it too much, but I have a concern sometime about kind of the background that everybody has gone through, or as far as we as a trustee, we vote as to who the president is, or not the chair. And I would hope that to be voted on the chair should be somebody that's at least spent 1 year on the, as a trustee.
Makes sense. Yeah,
Good point.
that could be the addition, right?
So moved.
Well, we're gonna do this in May, right? But these are great ideas. And so, in
Yeah.
the follow-up, you done follow, is that it? That's
Yeah,
great. So as a follow-up, Francisco, I agree with you when they said a 20-year term or 25 years, or for the next 20 years. I was thinking of the opposite direction. I think HASPA, I hope HASPA grows to a point where lots of members, I hope we get lots of grants, and I hope we, we're gonna have to change the JPA just because we need to hire an executive director or whatever you want to call that person and a staff to run this program, because I love the fact that the agencies are sacrificing and we've got excellent staff here, but everybody I'm looking at's got a real job. And this is not extraneous, but it's straining is what it is. So if we expand, I think we're really going to need to change this JPA in the next, hopefully the next 5 years and make it a bigger, better machine. And then just one more comment. I'm really happy we're separating the tax responsibilities and their document from ours. It makes sense to me. And as much as I love those people and we couldn't do anything without them, it is kind of a separate document to me. So have we finished that section of questions? Oh, pardon.
Comment that you made, want to make another comment regarding, I guess, let me say this like this. The fact that we're saying that the member agencies are going to manage the HASPA process, that is going to be an issue for my particular agency. And so, when we get to that point, we need to maybe ante up some more money or whatever, but as you said, our people have full-time jobs, and then to try to move HASPA forward, it's just a lot of responsibility. So that's a big issue for my particular agency. I'm sorry if I jumped ahead, but when he said that, I decided to tag team on it.
So that's a great point, and we'll note that. And got a lot of stuff for May 11th. One question, Nicole. So we keep saying term in office or term here. We haven't hit term limits yet. That's later down the line, right?
So term limits, as we don't exist currently in the JPA, so for, and I'm thinking about it in the context of officers. That's how we discussed it when we were working through this document, is that there are no set term limits for officers. I think in our experience, it can be really helpful to have someone who has established experience working with the agency in a role as an officer. And so I think what we've contemplated is that is a substantive and worthwhile discussion that we think should be reserved to board bylaws. And that's where if the board would like to establish term limits or not for officers, that's where that information would be held. Similarly, if there's an interest in establishing any other parameters around officer roles, such as you need to have served on the board for a year, that's where so the rules that govern how you all function and manage the interactions of the board and the agency, we would recommend reserving those to bylaws document. Besides being easier to amend as needed, it is a little bit extraneous to the agreement between the parties, the member agencies here. It's a little bit separate. All right. So voting, this is I think I'm just going to move through the voting slides and then we can stop and answer questions. I appreciate that there's a lot here. So to align with the term sheet, this draft of the JPA describes the actions that require unanimous approval of the board and the actions that require only majority approval of the board. And what we tried to do is look for areas where we could promote greater efficiency in accomplishing HASPA's work. And we created some parameters around that. So we're starting here, this slide summarizing
sort of general operational and financial matters and what the voting authorities and thresholds would be. So general matters related to the governance of HASPA requires only a majority vote of the board. Waiver of dues, reduction of dues, setting any kind of tiered dues structure, or the imposition of funding requirements on the parties requires a unanimous vote of the HASPA board. Increase in the dues of less than 25% requires a majority vote of the HASPA board. And increase in dues greater than 25% requires unanimous approval by the HASPA board and the member agencies as a more formal JPA amendment. This one kind of splits the line in terms of it's a financial matter, but it would technically be, I think, an update to or an amendment to the JPA, and that's how we're conceptualizing it here. So what the term sheet stated was that the board should have the authority to add or raise annual dues. And so this is a slight modification on that. It effectively gives the board authority up to a point, and then beyond that point would require approval by the member agencies as well as by HASPA's board. And so to respond to your question about 25, I think that's a decision for the trustees with whatever appropriate input you can receive from the TAC, because it's about efficiency and giving a mechanism to raise dues consistent with what we were seeing in the term sheet without requiring every dues increase to go back to all of the member agencies. You recall our schedule at the start had I think we had 2 full months for member agency approval. That's a not insignificant amount of time, and it does take time for these things to go through various review and vetting. So that was the idea there, but certainly up to the board's discretion in any discussion. And then I think one other slight change that I just wanted to call to your attention is that the proposed addition of new funding requirements only requires unanimous approval of the board, not of the member agencies. It's in that bucket as currently drafted. And so I will, I think, stop there before we move to JPA amendments, unless you'd like me to move on to the next one. So the question here, so the categories are, first of all, who is required to vote on this? The trustees or the governing bodies? And then if the body needs to vote on it, what's the threshold? So because the governing bodies don't need to vote on those matters, there's no applicable threshold.
What does the CPI apply to?
The CPI increase applies to previously adopted dues. So if the HASPA board,
Okay,
Mhm.
so that would happen automatically?
that's how it's drafted.
And it will happen automatically in addition to, say, if the HASPA board decides to increase the dues on top of the CPI?
The way it's drafted, it's either one or the other. So the board can either act to increase the dues or the automatic CPI increase kicks in. So if there was no increase in dues for a period of time, we would still have that mechanism where it would be the dues would be incrementally increasing, but the board could always step in and propose a greater increase or a different amount, change the dues separately from that mechanism. No, not as it's drafted now.
If I remember right, there's some flexibility within the dues. Now, I guess if a smaller agency felt that they just couldn't afford it, there is a chance to the rest of the board voting to give them the break. So I don't think it's something somebody needs to be afraid of as far as a 25% increase. I think there's plenty of cushion there, to flexibility to make everybody happy.
Is that in the bylaws someplace where it says that?
It's in the bylaw.
It's one of the items that we've established as sort of one of the voting thresholds. So the board has the ability to waive dues, reduce the amount of dues for a party. That's contemplated under this voting structure and in the language of the JPA.
Is there any reason that 1, 2, 3 down, or it says less than 25% increase? When you said a majority vote, could you tie that to, or could you make that a unanimous thing? Because 24% could be a majority vote and be a burden for some of the smaller districts.
I mean, I think this is completely within the purview of the trustees, so I'll take whatever direction you all have on that.
It's just, you know, a smaller budget, you gotta watch out for that. And if it's written in there somehow that there are ways to waive it, I imagine that might cover that problem.
On another board that I serve on, Castle Board, it's scaled by the size of the agency, which takes into consideration, you know, I don't know if we want to go to that layered approach, but that's how CASA balances, you know, small agencies versus big agencies.
Stopwaste.org also.
I mean, that's, so if you look at the bottom, second from the bottom, setting tiered dues, that's what we were thinking of there. If the board wanted to establish that, that structure doesn't exist now, at least as far as we know, but that there's flexibility. If the board wanted to take that approach, we would require a unanimous vote as currently drafted. And we know that was sort of
Okay, so
contemplated
that
in the
means
term
that we
sheet.
have to do another iteration of this, is what you're saying.
It'd be an amendment. Well, it would be a change to the language of the JPA because the dues are currently set in a schedule, but if you think about it, it's effectively a document attached to the back of this whole agreement. So if the board wanted to establish a new dues structure, it could do that, and it would require just changing out that one schedule. And we've delegated authority or established delegated authority to the board so that the trustees could sign on behalf of their member agencies for making a change like that.
I'm just thinking if you're trying to recruit more people, or more agencies, excuse me, to be a part of it. You know, the initial dues may prevent some agencies from being a part of it. That's all.
If it's a small agency, then something lower.
The only thing.
Although 12,000 is not a lot.
No, and I would add, yeah, there's somebody on the chat, and it's, I think, Ms. Barnhill from Alameda. Yeah. So there's got to be some way we can hear those folks. And there it is right there. Thanks, Amanda.
That's what I was addressing.
Well, you know, this is a interesting concept because as the largest agency, and we don't have a problem paying, but I mean, I think we need to think how we're going to do this because this isn't like CASA where everyone is a enterprise district. It's, I mean, what would be the criteria? How much revenue we generate every year, or what's our operating budget? What's the size of our district, meaning geography or population, or maybe it could even be zeroed in as how much of the Hayward area shoreline planning map do you represent? Because it is different. And it's, you know, there are enterprise districts and non-enterprise districts. It's a lot easier for districts to do that kind of work. So I think it's a great discussion and we need to think about it. And I personally believe in fairness. It is true, if we want to attract more agencies, we can't be, like say Francisco, 12,000 isn't much, but it could be in the future. We can start going big. So
No.
I think we should discuss it at May 11th, or hopefully you attorneys will be before that. Hear our discussion today and try to
Come up with
figure that one out, or I don't know, is it?
I think the question certainly of transitioning to a tiered dues structure or something along those lines, I think is a bigger, meatier discussion that it's pretty substantive to the operations of HASPA. And so I think what I would suggest is that I think the question on this voting chart here is really, do you all think that this offers the appropriate amount of flexibility, authority, oversight in the right places to modify the dues and, you know, really anything else around funding in the future as HASPA is ready to do that?
Our understanding is that HASPA isn't ready to do that for this next update of the JPA. But if these thresholds and the different authorities are, in your view, the right place, or sort of correctly oriented, that's really the question, I think, for today. Does this chart, which reflects the drafting of the JPA, contemplate the various scenarios that you all think are the key scenarios for your agencies to sort of be part of this agency moving forward? And are the authorities in the right place and at the right level?
Questions, comments?
I think I support going to unanimous for that one, was a majority of the third one down for majority or unanimous. But it's 25% or less, just because we're small. And there are going to be other small agencies as well. So if it's really that pressing, it wouldn't be hard to get a unanimous decision, I don't think. And then there's already a mechanism in place, correct, where the dues do increase for the CPI and so. So that would be what we're hoping for.
Well, I just think you guys did a great job of wordsmithing. I was really impressed with what's here, and I think you built in enough flexibility that I don't see this as going to be a problem. And if we did have a vote and it turned out to be a 5-1, we'd have to listen to the one agency as to why they feel it's unfair. And I think we're kind of going in the dark anyway, and we're going to have to figure some of these things out as we go. But I don't see any of us being cutthroat, so I think we can be very flexible in the future.
Yeah, and also, you guys are saying that 1,000 isn't a lot, but what are we getting for that? I mean, that's the other side of it.
I'm new, I don't know.
I'm not. Well, I'm not there yet, so I'm just like, what is the benefit? Because right now it's a lot of work. I mean, it's going to be a lot of work, particularly if we decide to hire an executive director or general manager, whatever we want to call them, because it'll be our role to set the course. What is the goal? What do we want to achieve in that year? We got a nice plan, but implementing things take time. But the other part for me is that, okay, yes, I love the goal of HASPA. And when is the benefit going to pay off?
I'll answer no one else does. Yeah, I mean,
For my 12,000.
oh, sure. Well, in my opinion, that probably would have been a pretty good question, or still a very good question right now. But I mean, a number of years ago, I've been on HASPA for a long time. HASPA, we used to have a lot of activists, great people that were talking about protecting the shoreline, doing lots of things. Now we have an action plan. We have an enemy. The big bad enemy is sea level rise. So we need to protect our shorelines. We need to protect it. People have bought into that. Everybody seems to agree with that. And based on the fact that, nobody put a gauge on this, but the fact that we have an agency that's been in place with the same mission statement, essentially change to climate change, and really getting into that for so many years. When we apply for grants, we were able to get, what was that? Was it 400,000 or $500,000, wasn't it, from Caltrans? We're the only agency doing that kind of stuff. Pardon me, we're not the only agency doing that stuff, but we're down here, we're on the cutting edge. We got that money from them based on our good reputation. And you're $12,000 into it to say that we're holding meetings. We have a board of trustees, we have a technical advisory committee, we have published an incredible document for our master plan at the Hayward shoreline. Laura Loma has done the horizontal levee. We're poised, we're ready to go. So if we keep the commitment, in my opinion, we'll still be moving along, and we'll be an agency that's growing because we're adding 40% more members than we had before, and we hope to get more, and we'll continue to have the influence and granting of things. sort of tooting our own horn here for the regional parks, but on January 20th, when we had the meeting down here on the shoreline and invited everybody in the world, there were lots of people. I was amazed at that guy. I hope you all met him. I don't know, I forgot his name. That young man that came up and was shaking everybody's hand saying, hey, I work for Gavin Newsom and I work for the state agency and I really want to get involved in this. This sounds really, really good what you're doing. And our staff, we usually go to assembly members and senators occasionally and some local people. I don't know who invited Gavin Newsom's staff, but he was interested. And that, because we have an agency that does that, we have a name, get some bumper stickers. You do, yeah. So I think that's what you're, yeah, I think that's what our 12 grand gets us.
Okay, I'm just saying that if we're gonna be selling it and trying to recruit people, not people, I was agencies, you know, what is the benefit? I know it's the climate change, I know it's sea rise, but you know, 12,000 is 12,000. And yes, we get to work together and, but right now we're informing people of the state, the status of where we are. And I'm not disagreeing with you, but what I believe is that we need to be thinking about when we tell a story and we want to recruit agencies, what is that benefit that they're getting by joining us?
I think you're right.
That's all. I'm not disagreeing that. I mean, I drank the Kool-Aid. I'm here.
Finish it up.
You did.
With Dennis. Basically, what we do now by bringing more agencies in, we're making a louder voice to be heard for grants that are out there. And probably we get up to the front of the class or the line because it's not just one little small agency. It looks pretty impressive to have 7 or 8. And so I mean, it's helping each other and
Yeah, and I think we should do, maybe we haven't sold ourselves enough or educated ourselves enough. I mean, I think the Hayward Shoreline Project or Hayward Marsh Project that East Bay Regional Park's doing, we use HASPA's name all the time and we're going to get lots of grant money for that. And I think each agency will benefit that are all in this group here. Hopefully I mean, it would be wonderful if we all got the same, but who knows how that's going to work. But I think we're stronger as one than we are as 7 or 8 different agencies begging for the same pot of money.
No, as I said, I drank the Kool-Aid and I went back to UC and so legislators, you know, pitched HASPA because I believe in it. But that was to legislators, but I'm thinking if I was going to go to an agency and share why they should join, and maybe that's me needing to have a one-on-one with you or with you to say, okay, what is the benefit?
I like the 4 points that are highlighted in this GPA, where promoting public health, protecting critical infrastructure, maintaining the public shoreline, and climate adaptation measures. In my mind, those are key, and that's the reason. But the problem I see is that people don't know what HASPA is. So I can ask my neighbors, and they go, "What? I have no idea." And they live right by Shasta. That's where I live. So I'm here also because I want to protect the shoreline. I want to work. I think the mission of this body is an excellent one. But we need to tell people about this. All the residents of Hayward, etc.
one other thing that is our TAC grows. Each time we get another agency, I mean, a lot of stuff goes in there, right, Brian?
Is this the right time for me to ask what other agencies have been invited to join us?
Sure, we can do that. We invited everybody, flood control, Alameda County Flood Control. Who are the private agencies we asked? We asked Union Pacific Railroad, obviously they're not going to say anything.
Union Pacific Railroad, or Castro Valley Sanitary District.
Okay.
BART, Caltrans,
County of Alameda?
EBJA, Alameda County flood control district.
Okay.
They were asked,
Stopways.org,
they were not asked.
they were, I would suggest that we ask stopways.org, because they're also Bay Area, East Bay, so that's another one. Okay,
San Francisco Bay Restoration.
all right. But the county, Alameda County itself has not been invited. No, because they take care of unincorporated areas. In my mind, they ought to have a seat on the table and be interested.
Yeah, we would love it. Alameda County Flood.
So
Control District would like to
So
donate.
send our new supervisor.
Will do.
All right.
Excuse me. All right, so great discussion. I don't know if we've resolved any of these voting issues, but we've raised a number of questions for sure.
And I think that's a bit, but this issue, well, certainly, I think the question of requiring unanimity for increases that are less than 25%, I guess I would just ask if anyone has any concerns with that approach.
Could be stated differently that on the second one, or sort of greater than 25%, has to be unanimous. Could we lower that 25% number to anything above the CPI inflation rate?
So CPI, so.
Or whatever normal inflation we get on that.
So
anything greater than that.
anything higher than the adjustment
Right.
is automatic.
Higher.
That would be, that would be based, as drafted, it would be CPI or 5%, up to a max of 5%. So we would be talking about 5% or less, basically, whatever CPI would be for that year, or 5%, I suppose.
So anything we want to go for higher than that, would have to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's an issue. I mean, if in fact we're going to expand and there's no question, or pardon me, there's no question in my mind that we're going to need to hire staff. So you're right, it's going to have to be a question we all ask ourselves, and it probably should be unanimous, because it will be more than 5% for sure.
Unanimous.
To do that.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that'll tie us up too much, but
So, unanimity
Or really any dues increase of any amount. So I would say, I think from the perspective of what that percentage is, the value is that below that percentage does not also require a vote of the governing bodies. It's just rests with HASPA. So the lower that number is, then obviously it captures more. But if that's the direction from the trustees, we can incorporate something like that. It's about kind of what the efficiency is of the agency, and what the if there are enough mechanisms here to, as you mentioned, provide relief for agencies, does this additional flexibility become maybe a little bit less concerning? That's kind of the balance here.
yeah, the most evil me keeps thinking that as we expand, and I hope we expand, one person is literally like the UN Supreme, one veto, and the most wonderful things in the world can happen, and then one person, nope, we're not for it, and it's gone. And if we do expand, that'll be obviously the poorest agency, I don't know who that'll be, we'll just go, no, heck no, we're not gonna do that. And then there's no increase and there's no progress, in my opinion. So
it's built in, like, automatically.
say that,
So there would be an increase, it's just a matter, I'm just thinking 25, if you hit up to 25%, that's a huge burden for some.
Yeah, that's where negotiation.
I think we would negotiate it.
Yeah.
There's no question that everybody, in my opinion, we're very, the last thing any of us want to do is lose members.
No.
So we're very sensitive to the facts. Some of us are rich agencies, some of us are not so much rich, but we're very happy that you're here, and just, once again, power in numbers, I think, is very important. And I think I mean, after all this, I think this is very logical. I think lots of attorneys thought about this, and it makes sense to me the way it's done. We can wordsmith it and change it around a lot, but I think when we start saying unanimous, that just makes everything kind of almost impossible. And then I guess the final deal would be, what's the buyout on here? There's nothing that can force you to stay. We'd love you to stay. And if we would love you to stay so much, we have the idea, the ability to waiver, the waiver of dues is the deal there.
There's a mechanism for tax.
Every agency has the ability to say, we're sorry, we're out, we can't play. Or we can say, no, you're so valuable, we're gonna let you play for less money. Is that sort of the way this is set up?
I think it is, as you all have stated, right? It does come down to the, in practice, will very much come down to the collaborative relationships that the trustees have and the discussion and the negotiation. The mechanisms to seek things like waivers or reduced dues are built in. The ultimate backstop is withdrawal, but that's obviously not, I think, as I'm hearing, in the interest of the agencies or the trustees. So there are, I think, a few different mechanisms and backstops. I do agree. I think we should be cautious when sort of applying the threshold of unanimity. It's a high bar, and it can, you know, as you mentioned, it can be misused. So it's just something to be thoughtful and deliberative about before you take that step, and to not overuse it, because it can become a real burden.
I honestly I can't imagine 25%, mainly because another thing they have built in here is East Bay Regional and the city of Hayward have, I guess, they volunteered to be the managers, because I know when it was our turn, it was hard to work and do all that needs to be done as whoever's the manager, the host manager. So they said there would be a nominal, that's not the right word, a minimal fee that the smaller agencies would kick in. And believe me, it's going to make life a lot simpler going back and forth between Hayward and East Bay Regional and trying to have a small agency struggle to do everything that has to be done to be sitting here. So it just may be with a nominal fee is going to be enough to kind of support the staff that's working, to the point that, I don't know, it may be way down the road that we would have a regular manager that has to be hired, and maybe what's been suggested in here may take care of us for quite a few years. Maybe not unless the good money rolls out a lot of it.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a lot of ifs and buts. I mean, I would prefer, majority over unanimous, just simply because, well, for one thing, 25% increase sounds awful, but you can go up to. So 25% is 3,000 per agency. And that comes out to, as we have 5 agencies right now, that'll be $15,000. We're not going to hire an executive director or anybody for 15 grand. We're not going to get a clerical person for 3 months for that kind of money. So it'll be much bigger changes than us or somebody coming to us saying, hey, we're going to raise the rates 24%, 24.9%.
So do we need to vote on whether it's unanimous or majority? Let's vote on it. And just do it and decide it right now, unanimous or majority.
I'm prepared to do that if you guys, I mean, if we had enough thoughtful, I was hoping our attorneys might weigh in it a little more, but I guess they're probably not going to meet anymore, right?
No, so we're still receiving attorney input, so that might be, I was gonna suggest so we can kind of move on to the next slide, that maybe the next step here is, I think we've gotten good input, and we're still getting input from the attorneys that we will fold in to the next updated draft, and I think this is helpful discussions. There's probably some push and pull.
That's what I just would say. first we gotta take this back to discussion with our board before we make a vote that's gonna have to be taken, drawn back or whatever. I think we're getting the cart in front
I
of the
think it's
horse.
great, I think what you've done is
Nicole, before you move on, you're gonna move on to the next section. I just remembered that Director Hodges, or Trustee Hodges has to leave, he told me. Which brings in a great point, because as Paul leaves, under the section of the HASPA board, there's a line that says each trustee or alternate trustee serving in their absence. I would highly encourage everyone here, now that we're starting to get some substantive work, some important stuff talked about. Please get an alternate. Please have an
And
alternate.
this was not an accident. This is.
Yeah, and oh, by the way,
Who's gonna take?
Lou Andrade from
Like
Hard
another
is in
one.
fact the alternate, right? So he's going to take over, and that's what we'd really like to see, just no empty seats. It's a very simple thing to do, and I think the more board members and council members that we can introduce to HASPA, I think the better off we're all gonna be. So bringing substitutes in, they'll see what we're doing here. And I think they'll like it. Sorry for interrupting. We'll be here till 9. Who's bringing dinner?
It's tag team plan. Yeah.
Oh, hey, Amanda, do we have any substantial chats?
No, the chats are basically people dropping off the call.
Okay, great.
Well, it's been good working with you guys, and you can go over the Hayward.
No. The main vote's gonna be on May 11th.
No vote today.
All right, go in your 2 cents.
And I'm an alternate, so the system works well.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I was an alternate, I'm no longer.
Right. So this next vote in charge, is kind of the next bucket of votes. These are JPA amendments. And the way we conceptualize this is that if this document kind of functions as we've intended and hoped and really sort of lasts you all for some time, then there likely will be amendments and updates that are needed to accomplish things that are within the scope of what the parties intended, and don't require the vote of the governing body. So a streamlined process for those JPA updates that don't quite rise to the level. And so what we have drafted here are really kind of these 2 buckets. And as it's drafted in the agreement, the governing bodies are delegating authority to the JPA board to make certain decisions and certain amendments to the JPA, and I've listed them here. So dues increases up to 25% or any decrease on dues, as we've been discussing. Revisions to the JPA that are necessary to affect the purpose of HASPA, and non-substantive amendments to the agreement. And then we've added further clarifying language that any amendments that alter the authority or purpose of the agency, any amendments that affect the rights, obligations, or the status of any party, those are changes that would need to go back to the governing bodies. Those aren't included in this, what's intended to be a very specific delegation of authority to capture a smaller bucket of activities and updates that will sort of streamline the ongoing functioning of the agency. And then obviously the addition of any new party is going to affect the rights and obligations of the others. So that one should also go to the member agencies. We understand from the term sheet that there was an interest in having a more streamlined process for adding new parties. So we've done that, we've added that later, but it would still require a vote of the governing bodies as well as the HASPA board.
Questions, comments on it?
All right. All right, so our next section here, this is a new section. So this section really builds out this concept. Currently, there is a 5-year rotation among the agencies, and they sit in the role of managing agency, and they manage HASPA. Our understanding is that the trustees wanted the flexibility to have a managing agency, but also perhaps to contract for the services of a manager or to hire a manager. So we've built out those alternatives in the language of the JPA. So one of the items on the term sheet was changing the rotation from every 3 years, or from every 5 years to every 3 years, and we'll talk about the impacts and the effects of that. But I wanted to flag that in addition to the changes that you see in the language of the JPA, we're also proposing a number of sort of corollary documents that will support this rotation or a rotation of managing agency. And that's because in our experience, what we've seen is that regularly rotating the role of managing agency can create some risk that things slip through the cracks. There's a lot of administrative obligations to maintaining a separate public agency. And so you want to make sure that someone is keeping an eye and checking the box on all of those commitments and obligations that don't necessarily come up every year, every 6 months, but less frequently than that, periodic updates. And so what we are is a series of documents. The first, as I've discussed already, these trustee bylaws that cover meeting procedures. If the trustees would like to set officer term limits, procedures related to the withdrawal of an agency, we have some sort of streamlined procedures in the JPA, but the more robust, notice period and all of that kind of stuff would go in the trustee bylaws. And then an explanation of the delegation of authority that we were just discussing on the previous slide related to amendments to the JPA. That's what we're envisioning now for this trustees bylaws document. In addition, financial procedures that covers the audit procedures, lists the treasurer and auditor by agency. So as the agencies rotate, it's clear who sits in that role. Explanation of the manager and auditor duties if the two individuals are from the managing agency, or if they're the manager under the JPA law, the rules change a little bit. So that would all be set out there. Official bond requirements. So making sure that really from a financial perspective, it's very clear to the new managing agency what all the different steps are, what all the different moving pieces are. TAC guidelines memo, as I mentioned, and then governance rotation procedures. So a recommendation of how the managing agency could staff HASPA, the voting threshold summary chart that you all just saw, records transition procedures, and then general governance reminders. And need to update the statement of facts, form 700, conflict of interest, just things like that may not be immediately on the radar of the new managing agency, building that out a little bit. So to step back to the meatier discussion of the rotation period, as I mentioned, regular rotations create some risk. We can address some of that risk by creating these corollary documents to help make it easier and smooth any transition from managing agency to managing agency. But that risk and the impacts, particularly on smaller agencies, can only be managed to a degree. And so what we've heard, this concern about the rotation and the frequency of the rotation was raised by the full legal team. They all had concerns about the regularity, both from the administrative risks as well as the impacts on smaller agencies and what that might mean. And a few different ideas were pitched around. One would be a rotation among a smaller subset of the agencies. The staff report mentioned the Regional Park District and Hayward, just because they're the largest. Both those agencies would need to approve and vet that, and they have not. So it's not ripe for any kind of decision or weighing in. I think staff still needs to internally determine whether or not that would be an appropriate subset, or if some different subset would be appropriate. And the corresponding idea would be the agencies that are not part of that rotation would pay for the costs of the agencies that do sit in the role of managing agency. That's one option. Another option, as the trustees have already mentioned today, is that there's a desire to move towards hiring or contracting for a manager. And so the trustees could sort of set a plan to do that on a shorter term. I think the Regional Park District has another 1.5 years left on its managing agency rotation. And so thinking through whether that's something that might be done. But I think this discussion, quite frankly, probably warrants discussion with your staff and with your attorneys to flush it out, and what the options that might be that are acceptable to your agency. I don't know that it's necessarily right for today, but we wanted to raise it to you as a really substantial issue that we heard from the legal team. I think we've heard it again today. It's a considerable issue.
My board would like to. Because one of the things that I would challenge them with is, okay, so how much money do we need to contribute or raise or help to get a manager? Because what our board was thinking, and myself personally, that the model that EPA has is what we were thinking was going to be for, excuse me, for HASPA, that you have a general manager that is responsible for moving HASPA, identifying the money, what resources do you need, you come to the trustees and we in turn go to our boards. But as far as, our general manager having to manage HASPA for 2 or 3 years it's not going to be something that I can sell to my board. I know that.
So at the moment, the proposal is Hayward and East Bay.
No, as it's drafted, it's what was provided in the term sheet, which is a rotation among all the member agencies.
All the
every
members.
3 years. What I'm sharing is that the feedback we've heard from the TAC, from the legal team, from the trustees today, is that in practice is not an option that folks can accept. And so we're throwing out some options for the trustees to consider. I think they probably all need to be developed more before we could even begin drafting or putting something together on that.
Your idea is good. It's just deciding which of the agencies can actually take those duties in those 3 years. Yeah, so I need to go back to our city staff and then ask if that's a possibility for him to take over. And I don't know, I did not do my homework, so I don't know what the budget is or how much money is in the kitty, HASPA's kitty. But if we don't have enough money, we certainly cannot hire the manager unless we have somebody with a big volunteering heart who would want to do it pro bono. And those are hard to come by. So I don't know, is East Bay willing to take over for 3 years?
Well, like everyone else, I'm not going to speak for my agency. What I personally believe is I think there's ways we can do this. We're big enough. We have enough staff. And I might add that HASPA's been around for how many years? 70. Yeah, 70. And we've been doing this rotation. I know things have become more complex and blah, 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 blah. And no one's got any time to do anything anymore. But in fact, it's been successful for 50 years doing that. 2 years. I understand the burdens of other agencies, but I think there's ways we could work it out. If, say, the regional park district decided to, or took our obligation on to run this for 3 years and be the administrators, maybe there's some help that could be done by the agencies that couldn't afford it, like HARD providing this facility, opening it up, Brian doing all the work to get everything set up, and have us just have a technical person to
Delegate
sort
some of the work.
coordinate. But yeah, share the load. There's some people that can shoot a 3-pointer, and some people are going to have to create a screen and let the 3-point shooter shoot. Everybody can help out in a way, and I think we can work that out. Gosh, I'm looking at Ms. Barnhill's statements. I'm trying to read that. I mean, yeah, and are there any other JPAs that are sort of have our size and our scope, or it doesn't matter our scope, but I mean, does anybody else do things like this? Or do they all tax-based and have lots of
No, I mean, I
cash?
think there are certainly different structures that
I was mentioning, and I think this idea of a manager in conjunction with a managing agency is certainly one way to help. I think that's one way to help reduce some of that burden. There's quite frankly probably many ways to achieve this. It's really a question of what the agencies can reasonably commit to and what is necessary to support the agency. I think what's should be avoided is a situation where one agency is shouldering the entire load and there's no real option or alternative or way of making up that time, because as you all have mentioned, staff have full-time jobs, carving out the appropriate time for folks to do this important work is a big challenge.
I like this idea of being the managing agency and then having certain areas that can be done by some of the other agencies. So that's where the community, community wisdom, that's the team effort. And I think that's what's important. And so far it's been a team effort, so let's keep working on it. So if this is something that his agency can do, you ought to maybe explore what we can do to help out to ensure that you don't have burnout after 3 years or whatever. And then Taylor is going to go over to our staff at Hayward and say, is this something that we can do for 3 years? And then we would then share, or we would then tell the agency, well, we can't handle managing the community centers to me, or we can't handle something like that. So it's possible, no?
We can definitely discuss it. We haven't had a chance to discuss.
Right.
proposal.
Right. Yeah, so it's something to be discussed. So I like your idea. That's why you're the chair. Good.
Well, I don't know about that, but remind me, does anybody remember, can you get a grant to get a human being to run a foundation?
No.
Or does usually the grants are, they want brick and mortar stuff, right? I mean, who, God, I've been there so long, I can't remember anything. Who was the woman that we hired as our fellowship person that sort of arranged the I'm looking around, nobody was here.
Wow.
No, there was somebody else before you, right?
Yeah, we're all paid through the Caltrans grant.
Okay,
Maybe.
so you can fund positions, but it would be a real stretch to say, hey, we'd like to do something really good. Oh, pardon me, Lou, go ahead.
So it seems to me you're gonna have to have some sort of hybrid arrangement. If you hire a manager, you still have to provide some sort of office space or something. And the manager might be part-time, I don't know if that's how successful it is. But you have to tap into a source. I mean, in a sense, we're the local agency for the state's response to climate change. And everyone's dealing with it, So I don't know how, I mean, it's a big, obviously it's a huge problem, right? So how is, we're taking on this that's what we're doing, is taking on this climate change for our portion of the bay. Well, then, this maybe, maybe this requires bigger legislation, whatever. But it seems like, and then there's that $10 parcel fee that everyone pays in the Bay Area. I don't know where that money goes, but you know what I'm saying? There's that $10, you know what I'm talking about?
No.
So there's a parcel fee that we.
Parcel fees are thousands of dollars.
No. There's like a $10 per parcel fee that the state has passed about 5 years ago or so, that goes to some sort of climate change response or bay water. Yeah, there is this thing. I mean, I don't know where the money's going. Or
I'm sure
what
they squandered it, but
well, I'm just saying,
it's a good idea.
No, it's a thing, and it goes in every parcel in the area. And I'm surprised no one's seen that yet.
You mean the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, Measure AA? That's $12 a year to restore the bay, essentially.
Is that every parcel?
Oh, yeah, it's a parcel tax. It was everybody was mad that.
Well, maybe that's what we're talking about.
Facebook is paying $12 a year.
Because
so
people
what?
never more have to pay it, right?
Exactly, yeah, and 9 Berry accounts.
Maybe that's what I'm talking about. But anyway, I mean, is that what we're taking? Is that?
She put the link up here for us.
Good, thank you.
Trying to figure out.
Well,
Thank you, Jackie.
Well, that's probably going to be one of our biggest challenges, to figure out a way to make this agency work and how to get money to pay for it. But, we're
because everyone has really let George do it. I mean, that's the situation we're in. And including Hart, Hart would rather not. We're a recreation district. We have playgrounds and everything else, and this Bay Shore this is like a levy district almost, you know, that we're, or some sort of
It's
thing.
like flood control.
A flood control, yeah, levy, and so, you know, I mean, you know,
They don't want place.
we have a part of a trail that goes on for miles, but we only own part of the trail. You know, and we have this interpretive center. But I mean, you know, like when you have your mission statement as recreation, and then you're talking about bay, you know, sea level rise response, that's kind of like a little bit beyond our agency. That's my thing. And I forgot what agency you're from, but
Or Loma.
yeah, Orlando. Well, you're on the bay, but too, but I mean, you know, you have a,
But no.
but I understand, yeah, yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, no, but so there is kind of a, you know, self-interest in all this. But anyway, you know, I mean, ultimately you're going to face that fact. So I don't see that these agencies are going to be a managing agency. I think that you need to hire somebody, and you probably have to do some sort of model where you have, somebody has to provide office space, or, you know, for the thing. And then you have to, and then, you know, how, I mean, these are kind of basic questions. I hate to be throwing bombs, but I mean, this is the kind of basic question. How are you going to do it? And where are you going to, you can tap into like that Bay Fund or some other thing. I mean, this is, and of course we could be the agency that lobbies Sacramento for, hey, what about a new structure around the Bay? Because now this is the other thing, every Bay, the whole Bay, right? So you're only as strong as the weakest levee point, right? I mean, you know, whatever the response is, we can respond all you want, but if Union City doesn't, then, you know, the water comes in. So there's all these coordinate, has to be a coordinated effort.
And 0%, 1% of the bay, not just the bay, right? This little area, it's about what, 1% of the whole bay.
Yeah, when you think of the entire shoreline, it's a huge amount, you know. I mean, and you know, and there's a whole, I mean, we're part of a big infrastructure that is in danger.
Let's not give up, let's keep fighting.
But
That's why I thought this in my own mind, that we were modeling the EPTA JPA. And, you know, Orloma rents property to EPTA. I think they pay us $1 a year or whatever.
you know,
Right. And they, you know, a portion of our facility, and
Yeah.
and it works. But for me, it's, you know, if we need to hire someone, what kind of money are we looking at? To me, I'm more comfortable with going down that route of helping to find money to, when your, year and a half runs out, have it, you know, okay, by that time we need to have, what, $500,000 or whatever to hire this person. And part of that person's responsibility is to make sure that they keep helping fund their position. I mean, that's the model that I'm used to. But I'll try to sell whatever we decide
I
upon.
think you need to hire somebody, because, you know, hybrid model, because, you know, it's just a big burden on everybody, on the smaller districts to do it, you know. Yeah. Anyway, that's my statement.
Well, I think the only substantial change so far, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're going to change the burden or the opportunity to manage this organization from 5 years to 3 years, which will lighten the burden a little bit. There are a couple of facts. Yes, we have to look at hiring and getting a manager or whatever it's going to be, but we do have a year and a half. And I know that's not a long time, but you know, things change in a year and a half. All we need is a couple of these levies to blow out, flood the heck out of some of these industries over. No, I'm joking, but we need a good pestilence and famine. But I mean, I think we got opportunities. I think we're going to have to really do some more political activism, which I know the East Bay Regional Park District does all the time. We talk all the time. We talk, and we have friends in political places that know the shoreline. Eric Swalwell told us when we went to Washington, D.C. and said, hey, you got to help us on this shoreline. And he said, what are you talking about? I used to run here every day when I was an assistant DA or a deputy DA. And so he knew all about it. He came down here and he got us what we needed, which was, he didn't get us money, but he cleared up a little bit of the red tape of permitting. And Aisha Wahab, we visited her when she just came into office, and darned if she doesn't say, my recreation is being on the Hayward shoreline. So these people know about it and they know the value of it. And I think at some point, they're gonna come to the idea that we need, and fundings, we can be lean and mean. I mean, every one of our agencies that say we don't have a whole lot, look at look at what HARD's providing for us. You've got the facilities at the deal. We've got the resource that we can show people what we need to do. We've got a master plan in place. We just need money, and that's what everybody's in that same position. So I wouldn't panic at this point. I think we just continue ahead. We've got a couple of proposals. In the next year and a half, we'll have to look into that, see what the model would look like for a managing agency, or if somebody will just say it's worth it to us to take this over, or if we can figure a hybrid model of, I'm using words that I'm just using agencies, not planning, but regional parks run it, HARD provide the facility, or
something else.
Hayward do something else. Yeah.
Do we
Yeah.
have a lobby in Sacramento?
Well, we individually, I think I know the
But
National Park District
HASPA
does.
does not-
No, HASPA can't.
Yeah, stopwatch.org, we do have lobbies in Sacramento, and they're aggregating this money. And we're actually doing quite well. So HASPA does not, maybe that's something that we can work on. Salud.
Well, everybody's got a revenue source except HASPA. Our only revenue source is to kind of say, here's the dues. It's kind of like Cub Scouts. Bring your 10 cents and you get
What's
a
next?
snack.
Right, next section here is employees. This is a new section just to better protect HASPA and the parties in the event that they hire employees in the future. Oh, sorry, budget and finance. So consistent with the term sheet, this includes a schedule for the payment of dues, an escalator clause for the automatic increases of dues in the event that the board does not otherwise act to increase or decrease dues. And then we've moved all of the dues to a schedule, which, as we said, with these updates can be just replaced. Treasurer, controller, accountability, access to property and funds. Our revisions here are largely to align with the term sheet and the JPA Act. And then the procedures document that I talked about before. Termination, withdrawal of a party. These revisions are to align with the term sheet. In addition, with the suggestion of the legal team, we added a process by which parties that have left the JPA can be reinstated, effectively the more streamlined adding a party process if that comes up. And then some additional new sections here. We added a section related to elections in the event that HASPA would like to put a measure to the voters. We added a new section on boundaries and service area. So the idea here, and I can talk about it a little bit more on the next slide, but we've created kind of two new concepts here. There's the concept of what are the boundaries of HASPA, and then there's the concept of really where does HASPA do its work, and that's the service area. So I'll talk about that in a bit. Amendments, we have the delegation of authority to the trustees to approve some amendments. Other amendments require approval of the trustees and the governing bodies. And then a streamlined procedures for adding new parties. There's only so much you can do to streamline that process because it does still need to be approved by the governing bodies, but effectively the process is that an agency can submit a resolution to the manager of the managing agency. They will then draft the amendment and bring that to the board for consideration. Upon approval, it'll go to the member agencies. So then it's a little bit more of an opt-in process for new parties. So this is the service area concept that I was thinking of. This is our map of the service area. We now have 3 schedules to the JPA. One shows the boundaries of the JPA, which are the boundaries of the member agencies. But realistically, HASPA isn't going to be exercising its common powers all the way out in the far reaches of the regional park district. It's going to be focused on the HASPA service area, the Hayward shoreline, as it's always been defined. So that's what we have here. And the idea is that the board has the flexibility to modify the HASPA service area as it's defined here
And there's a streamlined process for that. So in the event, for example, the FEMA flood maps change, this service area will change in conjunction with that, and the manager or the managing agency has the delegated authorities to simply update this map. But it's a little bit more of a streamlined procedure for where HASPA is actively doing its work without touching the sort of broad legal definition of what the HASPA boundaries are. So another way to conceptualize this is, if the board wanted, it could include in its bylaws that it will meet anywhere in the HASPA service area. And that might give you the flexibility to avail yourselves of other locations if that was desired. Things along those lines. And then a few other new sections, a dispute resolution procedure that's just sort of an escalating process that can include mediation, arbitration, judicial determination, but effectively gives a roadmap for informal and increasingly more formal discussions, and then some standard sort of boilerplate clauses. We have our new definitions of manager, managing agency consistent with the other sections, and some updates to the financial provisions, again, kind of all conforming to the changes that we've already discussed. And I know we've done questions as we've gone, so this slide is now superfluous. That's the high level summary, and I'm happy to take more input on the slides that we just went through.
Could you add a chart like you did for voting? Could you have a chart for the responsibility of the respective agencies, the boards, what they have, what they need to approve, or when their boards is responsible for voting on something?
So just the items that would go to the governing bodies?
Yes, that, because your chart was made it very clear versus reading all of the language. So
The
you,
duties.
yeah.
Okay.
Particularly around voting, I mean,
The duties of the managing agent. Okay.
right, so the board would know where
Right,
our responsibilities are.
right. Good point.
Yeah, anyway. Thank you.
I have no questions.
No questions, comments? Questions, comments, yeah. We have one in the chat. Amanda, is that one in the chat, a question, comment?
Sorry, that was me asking Nicole to stop sharing the presentation so we could see your lovely faces.
That's part of the chat. Well, Nicole, thank you very much. As I understand, you've taken our advice, and we have lots of attorneys that were involved in this on the Zoom. Few questions, few things we'll need to work out. We have that opportunity on May 11th. If things don't get done by May 11th, we can have a special meeting. Not that I want to do that, but we can do that. Our goal, our charge is to get this thing done by June 30th. And by resolution, your individual boards sign off on this. So that's the goal. So, if you perceive that your board is going to have problems with what we've discussed here, please, I personally think this is a good organization. We've got a lot of challenges. The only challenge is we don't have any money. We've got a lot of great ideas and a lot of things to do, and then look at what we can protect. But if there are challenges, so if you perceive those, please don't wait till the June 20th meeting of your board. If you can discuss it at committee level or whatever level that you do with your individual boards or your general managers, please let's try to get this done, because it's an organization that we may once we get we got a master plan in place, once we get a JPA in place and a few more members, then we can start the grind and try to figure out how we get the money. But I think we can do a really good job on this, and
Well,
that's my spiel.
And know that I don't have an issue with the managing agency model, but I will share you know, if we can't do that, what can we contribute? And,
Okay, and I guess,
but I'll just let you know that, that's all.
well,
Doesn't mean that I'm not gonna try to sell
and I would personally probably agree with you simply because I like the idea of just an agency sharing it. I think 5 years is a burden. I think 3 years isn't that hard. I mean, I hope, you know, Devin and Eddie do a great job. They're smart, they're intelligent. Taylor, look what we got when Hayward was running the place. I think just bringing more people, get them involved in this. Everybody's gonna, what's a better word than I'm gonna use here? Everybody doesn't have enough time. Everybody's too busy. Good Lord, we can't say COVID anymore, I guess. What about supply
it.
chain? We keep
I
hearing
have
those
to
things.
push back a little bit. We don't have the depth that you have. Your Orlando is very small, 42
Well,
people.
I think.
But I'm just saying,
I think maybe we need to deal with the issue of, maybe we haven't explained well enough what the task is. I'm not going to suggest the task isn't hard and lengthy, and you may have to, but you at one point suggested that Jimmy's going to have a bunch of work. He's got is somebody that they designate to run HASPA or be the facilitator, essentially. You're a
his
facilitator.
admin, I'm just telling you, we're not very deep. And so my task is to share today with my board and say, okay, how can we be a part of this? We don't like this model. What is another model? Because this is going to help our shoreline. So it's not that we don't want to be a part of it, but we do not have the depth that Hayward has, or East Bay Regional Park. We just don't. We have 46 people.
Yeah.
Period.
Mhm.
And, you know, and
Small organization.
You're a mosquito? Oh, well, two mosquitoes.
oh, on the 18, okay. Yeah, well, yeah, but anyway, your point is well taken. Chair, you know, I'm gonna do my part. I mean, I volunteered to be on this because I drank the Kool-Aid. I'm serious.
Well, then I think we all have it. I think there needs to be a way to figure out exactly what it takes to become the manager of HASPA. What does it take? What's the cost? What's the cost in people? And then your board's gonna have to make decisions that work to
Right,
say
and
that.
that's,
But I mean, to suggest it's this giant burden, I don't think that it's that giant. a burden.
well, because you got, look at East Bay Regional Park, come on. I'm gonna leave it like
I
that.
admit we're the largest, and we'll bring the crowd.
Okay, can you be an assignment for us at Orlando when it's our time? We don't have planners, we don't have access, but it does not mean that.
And it's a personal commitment, by the board, because
But
it
it's
is
good for you to be here.
I know.
It's excellent.
And I'm just saying, and if we're gonna share that model with new agencies that's coming on, you know, I don't know. You know, it changes the direction a little bit. Not a little lot, but I'm just being transparent.
Well,
I have to make it real fast. There is a solution out there.
all right.
People working together.
Okay, well, so I've lost my place in the agenda.
Agenda,
I know it's in here somewhere.
all business.
We're on to item 4.
Is there any old business? Is there any old business?
Director, Chair Welsby, you wanted to recap about the January 20th tour, especially for those who couldn't attend. So I'll let you summarize what you remember about the tour.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so January 20th, it was, in my opinion, it was a great tour. It started off where, you know, we've mentioned a lot of times today that nobody knows about HASPA, nobody knows what it is, nobody knows anything about it. So the East Bay Regional Park District, as we've all admitted, has all the largesse in the world. We can do anything, because we've got lots of staff and lots of people. So we have a legislative department, government and legislative affairs department that definitely gets to our legislators, lobbies them, and is very successful in getting grants for the things we want. So we wanted to show them what we've got going on with the shoreline, with our Hayward Marsh situation, which is a restoration that we don't need to get into now, but other levee breaches and things like that that we're gonna have to deal with that we can't afford. Because like Lou says, that's, you know, we're a recreation park agency, but now we're also a stewardship agency, so we have, the point is we need more money. So we get together and we got our legislative people to show up. You know, we, in the district, we have 6 assembly members, 2 state senators, doesn't matter, but around here, we get all the ones we need. We invite them out here, we invite their staff, we show them what we're doing, we show them what we've got. And as you all know, when you're a park and recreation agency, you just bring people out of the park and they love you immediately. So we did that. And of course, I, who try to promote HASPA, said, hey, I invited everybody because it was a public meeting, and boy, the staff got mad at me for that one. But it turned out we had, how many people did we have?
It seemed certainly over.
Yeah, it was just great. And people got to know one another, people were interested in what's going on the shoreline, people got educated on what's going on with sea level rise. And as Francisco says, it's amazing. You know, we've got a little, what is it, 6 miles or 5.5 miles or whatever the Hayward shoreline is. The San Francisco Bay shoreline is over 500 miles.
Yep.
So everybody's got to get into it. If you really believe it, that it's going to happen, we've got to get together and somebody's got to do it. And I know other agencies are doing this, but we're one of the in the forefront. We're the ones that have the master plan. We figured out what's wrong. We've had lots of smart people figure out how to fix it. All we need is $1 billion, and that was 5 years ago, and it's probably 10 billion now. But the point is, you got to start somewhere. And so I think it was a very successful deal. I would love to see us do that. And maybe the regional park district got a little blown back by that. Why wouldn't we as HASPA do that? No, we can easily have a meeting that turns out to be, we'll show you one part of our master plan that we'd like to, one project we'd like to do. And I would hope, you know, what's that thing they used to call it? That was too awful that politicians get, assembly members get, senators get, they call them, what do they call them? Not setbacks. Set-asides, yeah. So, you know, we got $10 million from Rebecca Bayer, representative from out in Danville for some fuels management stuff. We get grants from these people that they see what we want to do and what we're doing, and it's very popular, and we honor them and make a big deal about it. So I thought it was great, in my opinion, to get us all out there. They came, they were able to see it. The park district come up to show what they wanted to accomplish. I think hard, our HASPA got to show what we can do, and I sure hope we can do that in the future. HASPA can do that ourselves. We can organize that. We can do it. Simply because you go out there and show them that resource.
So put it in the agenda? Is that what you're recommending?
Well, I'm not recommending it. We got a lot of stuff going, and we got to, I mean, we're gonna wrestle like crazy on May 11th, and then we're gonna wrestle like crazy on when's the meeting after that, when we finally welcome in the new board members and have a party for the new JPA. But you know, that's maybe in August or September. I don't know. But we've got a meeting then. And,
yeah.
Put it on our list.
The first meeting of the new JPA. Okay, I wanted to open it up if there were any requests or other agenda items after May 11th, if the board had any requests. Chair Wasby had requested a presentation about algal blooms in the bay, and actually Jackie Zipkin at EBDA was preparing that, and she'll be ready to present that information in the August meeting. She was ready now, but we asked her to delay a little bit so we could just focus on the JPA. But are there other requests for presentations? Yes.
Are there areas within this district where we can plant trees? the area is huge. I know we can't go to the shore, you know, by the beaches. We don't have a beach, but are there certain areas where we can start hustling some trees and do some planting and maybe have a project, tree planting project?
Famous Brown,
Hmm?
famous Brown, 100,000 trees.
Yeah,
You know,
why not?
Yeah, that'd be a great idea.
And I was also walking around and there are a couple of small areas where there actually sand.
Well, but part of the JPA includes, part of the air service area includes industrial zone and Saddle zone and all of that.
So I'm wondering, is
So
there any areas there we can plant some trees?
Well, we just planted some in our new building.
Thank you. I like
Yeah, we
it.
did. I'm
like
just saying, and
So I don't know if that's something that we can look into after we're finished with this. And then maybe one day agendize it so that we can get together at the sandy beaches and clean them up. There's a lot of concrete and some tires and stuff. And maybe we can have a cleanup day of our Hayward Beach.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Discuss that with staff. We'll get you an answer about the tree.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
well, we pulled 200 tires out of our front yard.
I love you. I'm married, but I still.
That's okay. I keep telling you, these, try to play.
Yeah, that's great.
One other question at this time, we might let the technical advisory committee members, if they have any updates or questions. We've lost some of them on the Zoom call, but Taylor, if you have anything. Okay, anybody else who's on Zoom from the tech, Jackie, or I think that may be it for now. Okay, okay. Oh,
Are we at 9:05 now?
yes, we can be on number 5 now.
Next week is Earth Week, I'm sorry. And at Chibok College, I will be planting a fruit tree at Chibok, as I've been doing for the last 15 years. So I invite you on Tuesday, 11 o'clock. Hayward, I'm not sure, are we doing Arbor Day? All right, so anyway,
Not a
so
good job to do
a lot of
that.
Earth Week activities, so be on the lookout.
All right, any other board member announcements? Trustee announcements?
Director, to introduce yourself formally, because I don't know that we have that.
Yeah, so from Hayward Area Recreation Park District. Lewis Underwriting.
Welcome, Lou. I'm sorry, we've been friends for so long. I thought you stepped in and it was
No,
like
yeah,
normal.
that's fine, yeah.
Any other trustee comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I went to DC and I want to thank you so much, Devin, they provided me materials to share about HASPA with the legislators that I visited, and they were really impressed with your literature and said that this tells a story. And that I know that was a purpose. And I did share that with Eric and with you, the names of the legislators that I visited. But I did say we needed $1 million. They didn't seem to flinch. But I don't know if we have, if they've written a check, but I did do that. So, and our new Orloma building, you'll be getting information about our ribbon cutting ceremony. You can get to see the tree. You can see the trees. It's, you know where the,
Over there is kind of large.
what a well, do you see the well? I mean, the building that has the well painted on it.
There are no whales.
That's where we are.
To invite us.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Well, but pardon me if I can interrupt. That is, if all the board member announcements are over, that is our next agenda item. Next meeting we are having is May 11th. And we've heard that Alameda County Mosquito Abatement District could host the meeting, or Orloma we've heard. So I don't want to fight over it. If you guys want to flip a coin, or we can do it at heart, I love it here. Or we can do it, can you do it here? There seems to be a lot of pride in each agency's deal. Okay, Rita, you.
It's good. I mean, because we have more meetings in the future.
Yeah, we can always run it for, okay, for now, let's keep it here.
Yeah.
That's great. And does anybody have any other agenda items that we would like to see talked about in the next few meetings? We've already talked about a few. Okay, hearing none.
Before we close, I did want to formally thank Brian Lasko at HARD and the HARD board and the HARD staff for setting up the audiovisual for this room in the last couple of months and helping us have a successful meeting. So thank you, Brian.
Yeah, they stepped up strong this TV set. They have the ability to have hybrid meetings.
Yeah.
So, also, I just like to say that, welcome Francisco, and glad you're here. And you know, Alyssa did so much for this committee, and she's such a good person. I love serving with her on committees. So if it's okay with you guys, if you all agree, I'd like to adjourn this meeting in honor of Alyssa and wishing her well on her new travels as a county supervisor.
Agree.
Cool. Okay, then we are in fact adjourned. Thank you all for being here, and thank you so much, Nicole.
Maybe she just, there.
Yeah.